Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, not with fire and fury, but slowly, methodically, with the soft hands of comfort and ambition gently choking your spirit while whispering, "You're doing great." You open your eyes and look around. The skyline has changed, taller, sleeker, shinier. The devices have changed, faster, thinner, smarter. Your schedule is full, your LinkedIn polished, your habits optimized. On paper, you are progressing. And yet, why does it feel like you're not really moving? Why does every accomplishment feel like a fleeting high, followed by a deeper void? Why does progress feel more like a treadmill than a staircase? You were told this was the point of it all. That life is a journey from less to more, from chaos to order, from ignorance to intelligence, from poverty to wealth, from confusion to clarity. That more is always better. That new is always superior. That the future is always an improvement over the past. But here you are burned out, anxious, overstimulated, underwhelmed, and quietly ashamed that you're not more grateful for it all. There is a term for this, the pathology of perpetual improvement. It's the sickness of needing to believe that life must always go up, economies must grow, technologies must advance, humans must evolve, societies must modernize, and your own life must become a better version of itself every year, or else something must be wrong with you. But what if that very belief, so deeply embedded into your psyche that it feels like truth, is the problem? What if progress, as you've come to understand it, is a lie? We've inherited a cultural mythology that glorifies advancement at all costs. But what happens when the things that look like progress from the outside, productivity, technology, consumption, convenience, begin to hollow us out from within? And what if the constant chasing of the next level is the very reason we can't enjoy where we are? You start to wonder, if progress is so great, why are depression rates rising? If we're more connected than ever, why do we feel so alone? If we've built systems to maximize efficiency, why do our lives feel increasingly meaningless? Why are we all running faster and faster only to arrive nowhere? Could it be that we've confused movement with direction? Could it be that what we call progress is simply the addiction to more speed, more data, more goals, more stimulation, while losing touch with the quiet, unquantifiable dimensions of being alive? We celebrate growth, but rarely ask, growth into what? We celebrate development, but rarely pause to ask, development at what cost? We don't stop to think whether this race has a finish liner if we're just spinning in an ever-tightening spiral, unable to admit that the very idea of endless progress might be absurd. You feel it in your chest now, don't you? A slight unease, a crack in the foundation, a knowing you've buried beneath productivity apps and inspirational podcasts and 10-year plans. What if the world doesn't need to be improved? What if you don't need to be improved? What if you were never meant to be a machine built for optimization, but a soul meant to experience mystery? And what if every step upward is not taking you to heaven, but away from the ground beneath your feet? The ground of slowness, the ground of being, the ground of presence. Let's not answer these questions yet. Let them haunt you for a moment. Let them rattle the well-oiled machine of your assumptions. Because to understand the lie of endless progress, you must first see the illusion it casts over your mind, how it dresses up exhaustion as ambition, distraction as evolution, disconnection as freedom. Now step into the silence with me. We are about to unearth something ancient, buried beneath algorithms and productivity hacks. Not a solution, not a shortcut, but a confrontation. A reckoning with the hidden roots of our collective anxiety and the false god we've been taught to worship, progress. Progress. A word soaked in hope, paraded in speeches, stamped on mission statements, whispered like a prayer in late-night strategy meetings. But behind its gleaming mask lies something far more unsettling, a deep and ancient fear. the fear of stillness. This isn't just a cultural accident or a modern dilemma, it's something embedded in the human psyche, woven into our nervous systems, calcified in our social structures, fed by our philosophies, and weaponized by our economies. To understand why we cling so desperately to the idea of endless progress, we must look not at where we are going, but at what we are running from. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls." This is what endless progress offers us, an elegant distraction, a way to keep running toward promotions, milestones, artificial goals, so we never have to stop and face the vast, terrifying silence within. Progress tells you, keep climbing, but it never tells you why you're climbing or what waits at the top, because if you stopped, just for a moment, and asked, "Is this mountain even real?" the whole illusion might crumble. Friedrich Nietzsche warned us of this when he spoke of resentment, the twisted emotional energy that builds when we define our value not by intrinsic meaning, but by comparison, by conquest, by chasing illusions others have handed us. When we can no longer bear the chaos of life, we invent goals, timelines, and ideologies of improvement just to make ourselves feel that we're going somewhere. But Nietzsche also knew that this kind of progress is a sedative for the soul. It numbs our raw, existential confusion with a hit of purpose. Each check mark on your to-do list feels like a shot of meaning. Each "New Year, New Me" mantra postpones the confrontation with your deeper self. Each step on the career ladder avoids the question, what do I actually want from life beyond status? What if the very idea of linear progression, always forward, always upward, is not natural at all? In nature, there are no straight lines. Trees don't grow forever. The seasons loop endlessly. Even life and death spiral in a cyclical rhythm. But in our civilization, we worship the line that only goes up. The GDP must rise. The population must grow. The markets must expand. You must do better than last year. Stagnation, we're told, is failure. Rest is laziness. Contentment is weakness. But perhaps it's not contentment we fear. Perhaps it's the mirror it holds up to us. Because if you are not endlessly progressing, then who are you? The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre believed that existence precedes essence, that we are not born with inherent meaning, and so we must create it. But when culture hands you a pre-made definition of meaning, success, improvement, progress, you stop creating. You start obeying. And that's when your existence becomes performative, mechanical. You wake up not to live, but to advance. To become an upgraded version of yourself, like a software update, more productive, more efficient, more aligned with the demands of a system you never consented to. But who benefits from this model of endless self-betterment? Not your soul, not your relationships, not your peace of mind. It is the machine of modernity that feeds off your constant movement, a machine that sees you not as a being, but as a unit of output. Arthur Schopenhauer, the brooding philosopher of pessimism, saw through this centuries ago. He believed that human desire is a trap, that we are driven by an endless chain of wanting, and the moment one desire is fulfilled, another arises. Progress, in this view, is not a noble pursuit, but an endless treadmill of suffering. You think you are ascending, but really, you are spinning in place, enslaved by the next thing you believe you need in order to be complete. So why do we believe this lie? Because the truth is harder. Stillness is not glamorous. It doesn't get likes. It doesn't impress hiring managers. It doesn't increase your quarterly metrics. Stillness forces you to confront the void, the silence beneath all your ambitions, the feeling that no matter how much you do, it never really feels like enough. That void is not a flaw. It's not a bug in the system. It is the system. Endless progress is built on the assumption that you are broken and must be fixed. But maybe you're not broken. Maybe the system is. Maybe the very belief that you must always become more is what keeps you from being whole. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Holocaust and author of Man's Search for Meaning, wrote, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." Modern progress has replaced meaning with momentum. You scroll, you swipe, you hustle, you optimize. Not because it leads somewhere, but because to stop would mean facing the raw chaos of being alive without a manual. So instead, you let the machine run you. It whispers, faster, better, smarter, more. You obey. And in doing so, you drift further and further from yourself. But here's the dangerous truth. Progress is not inherently bad. But when it becomes your identity, your drug, your got it becomes your cage. And once you start to see it for what it is, not a universal truth, but a psychological defense mechanism, you can begin to ask the real questions. Who am I without the next goal? What if there is no next level? What if life is not something to advance through, but something to feel, surrender to, and be inside awfully, messily, vulnerably? These are not easy questions, but they are real ones, and they might just break the spell. You've been taught to believe that progress is harmless, benevolent even, that it's the road to a better life, a better world, a better self. But what if the very pursuit of constant improvement carries unseen consequences so deep and corrosive that we've begun mistaking decay for development? You wouldn't notice it at first. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It whispers in the language of comparison, of discontent, of insatiable desire. It's the feeling of arriving at a destination you worked for years to reach only to feel emptier than before. It's the slow erosion of presence, replaced by anticipation. Always anticipating what comes next, never fully being where you are. And it begins young. You were likely never asked, "Who are you?" You were asked, "What do you want to become?" As if your current state was insufficient, as if your worth was measured by how far ahead you can project yourself into some hypothetical future. This is the first wound of the myth of endless progress. It amputates the present moment. In a world obsessed with next, the now becomes a nuisance. You feel this most acutely in your nervous system. The rising restlessness when you're not achieving something, the guilt of taking a day off, the tension in your body when you try to simply sit still. That's not laziness. That's the trauma of never being allowed to just be. Because in the progress paradigm, being is nothing. Doing is everything. But what does it cost to live like this? First, it costs your attention, the most precious, non-renewable resource you have. In an age of infinite scroll, your attention is auctioned off to the highest bidder, every ping, every notification, every headline, another hook into your mental bandwidth. And we call this connectivity. We celebrate this as technological progress. But the truth? You are being cognitively harvested. Your ability to think deeply, to focus, to reflect, to live slowly is being shredded by the very systems you were told would liberate you. Second, it costs your relationships. Endless progress has redefined intimacy into efficiency. We now optimize our dating lives with algorithms, swipe past human beings like products, and measure connection by frequency of communication rather than depth. Even friendship is collapsing under the weight of speed. Conversations are replaced by reactions. Presence is replaced by performance. Because when the world teaches you to treat yourself as a product, you inevitably begin to treat others that way too. You start to ask, what can this person offer me? Instead of, who is this person really? And in that shift, something ancient dies. The sacred slowness of truly knowing another human being. Third, it costs your identity. When you live under the spell of improvement, yourself becomes a project, something to hack, fix, and update like a faulty operating system. Your worth is outsourced to metrics. How many followers? How many hours? Worked? How many dollars earned? How many goals achieved? And slowly, without realizing it, you forget that you are a mystery, not a machine. You are not a resume. You are not a before and after photo. You are not a graph of upward mobility. And yet, that's what this myth does. It flattens the soul into statistics. Fourth, it costs the planet. Endless progress isn't just a personal affliction. It's a civilizational virus. Our economies are based on the idea of infinite growth on a finite planet. More extraction, more production, more consumption year after year, decade after decade. But nature doesn't operate this way. In nature, growth is seasonal. It peaks, plateaus, recedes, regenerates. Only cancer grows endlessly. Only addiction expands without limit. And yet, we build our entire economic system on this delusion, celebrating quarterly growth while the oceans rise, the forests burn, and the soil collapses. We call this advancement. But it's a slow, elegant suicide. Because the lie of endless progress blinds us to balance. It teaches us that limits are failures, that boundaries are obsolete, that the natural cycles of death and decay are obstacles to be conquered. But in reality, those cycles are wisdom, and we've silenced them. Fifth, it costs your sense of enough. This may be the most invisible and most devastating loss of all. Progress has no ceiling, no end point, no moment where the voice says, "You've arrived, rest now." Instead, it perpetually dangles the next level, the next upgrade, the next version of you to chase. And so you live in a psychological state of starvation. Even when you have food, love, shelter, safety, you feel a gnawing sense of scarcity, not because you lack, but because you've been conditioned to feel like you lack. This is the true genius of the system. It manufactures desire. It convinces you that peace is laziness, that contentment is regression, that the only way to stay relevant, respected, or worthy is to keep moving, faster, harder, smarter, more. But what if you stopped? What if you allowed yourself to feel the quiet, terrifying gravity of enough? No more self-optimization, no more comparison, no more compulsive chasing, just the stillness of being, the simplicity of presence, the radical act of loving what already is. That would be the beginning of freedom. But freedom comes at a cost too, the death of illusion. You'd have to let go of the fantasy that there's a final arrival point where everything makes sense. You'd have to let the hunger die without feeding it one last time. You'd have to mourn the future you were taught to worship and return, humbly, to the present you've always abandoned. That's not an easy path. But it's the only one that leads home. You've felt it, haven't you? That rising pressure beneath your daily life, the strain of always becoming, never arriving. The tightness in your chest when the world demands one more version of you, one more improvement, one more update. But what happens when you stop? What happens when you rebel not with fire and protest, but with stillness and presence? This rebellion begins not on the outside, but in the quiet revolution of your mindset. It's not a rejection of effort or growth. It's a rejection of enslavement to perpetual becoming. It's the choice to step out of the assembly line of the modern soul factory. Because here's the truth, the system will never tell you to stop. It will never give you permission to rest or to be whole or to be done. You must give that to yourself. But how? How do you break free from a myth so deeply woven into your language, your dreams, your identity? It begins with a single radical realization. You do not exist to improve, you exist to be. This is not laziness, it is not regression, it is reclamation, reclaiming your breath, your body, your moments, your mind. You were not born to be a constant work in progress. You were born to experience life, not just upgrade your role in it. The rebellion begins when you unlearn the metrics, reject the scoreboard, unfollow the algorithm of comparison. Stop treating your life as if it must justify itself to some invisible judge. You are not your productivity. You are not your performance. You are not your potential. You are something older than that, something quieter, something that doesn't need an audience to be real. This is where philosophy becomes a tool of revolution. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, they taught that peace comes not from control or achievement, but from detachment. Not the cold detachment of nihilism, but the warm detachment of someone who no longer needs to prove their value through outcomes. Imagine living like that. Imagine waking up and not feeling behind, not needing to catch up with the illusion of progress. This is the rebellion, to live a life that cannot be monetized, gamified, or compared, to take a walk without counting steps, to write without planning a brand, to sit in silence without feeling guilty, to be in the company of a friend and not post about it. That is resistance. That is revolution. You may think this sounds unrealistic. You may say, but I live in the real world. I have responsibilities. I can't just drop everything. And you're right. But this rebellion isn't about abandoning the world. It's about re-entering it differently, with intention, with slowness, with refusal to move at the speed of the machine, refusal to treat your soul like software, refusal to measure your life by how much you produce. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, imagined a society where progress had sterilized meaning, where comfort had replaced freedom, where stimulation had replaced depth. Sound familiar? He wasn't warning us about the future. He was describing the slow death of wonder happening right now. So how do we respond? By creating sacred pauses. In a world of constant acceleration, stillness becomes a sacred act. Try this. Do one thing slowly today. Not efficiently, not multitasked, just slowly. A meal, a conversation, a walk. Reclaim time from the machine. Ask yourself one dangerous question. What if I stopped improving for a month? Not to decay, but to rediscover what's already enough. Write one page without purpose, not to publish, not to brand, just to hear your own voice again. These are not small acts, these are mutinies. Each one chips away at the lie. But perhaps the deepest rebellion is this: to live a life of inner richness, even if the world calls it wasted. We've been taught to fear that, to call it laziness, stagnation, failure. But Viktor Frankl would call it meaning. Nietzsche would call it authenticity. Jung would call it individuation. What does it feel like in practice? It feels like choosing depth over speed, like choosing real conversations over digital performance, like finding beauty in the ordinary, like letting a day be unproductive by external standards, but healing to the soul. This is how you break the spell, not by rejecting progress altogether, but by reclaiming it on your own terms. Progress, in its truest form, is not vertical. It's inward. It's not about constantly going somewhere. It's about returning to the places you abandoned in the name of ambition, to the parts of yourself you buried beneath utility. It's about becoming whole, not just efficient. And maybe that means failing in the eyes of a system that worships movement. Maybe that means falling behind in a race that leads nowhere. But it also means remembering what it means to be human, to feel, to slow, to rest, to weep, to laugh without monetizing it, to create without performing it, to exist without apology. And when you do, when you finally step outside the orbit of endless becoming, something strange begins to happen. The hunger quiets, the anxiety softens, the silence becomes a friend again. And you remember, you were never supposed to be a product. You were never supposed to be perfect. You were never supposed to ascend some infinite ladder. You were supposed to be here, alive, aware, unfinished, and enough. You are standing at the edge of a cliff. Behind you is everything you've ever achieved. Every certificate, every promotion, every habit tracked, and every goal crushed. The architecture of your so-called success. In front of you, only open sky. No path, no step-by-step guide, no next milestone, just space. At first, you panic. What now? What next? What should I do? But then, a strange thought arises not from your mind, but from somewhere deeper. It doesn't sound like ambition or anxiety. It sounds like truth. You were never meant to climb the mountain. You were meant to feel the wind. You freeze. You begin to realize maybe the most radical act is not to move forward, but to stop altogether. Not in defeat, but in awakening. Because the real lie wasn't just that progress leads to happiness. The real lie was that happiness needed to be pursued at all. You've been taught that life is a game to be won, that your worth lies in the future version of yourself you might one day become. That meaning is always somewhere else, just a little further, just one more step away. But what if that's not true? What if the deepest truth is this? You are already whole. You've just been hypnotized into forgetting. And the systems that demand your constant movement? They depend on that forgetfulness. They require your amnesia. Because the moment you remember, the moment you stop running and look around and breathe, you're no longer controllable, no longer sellable, no longer manipulatable by the myth. That is the ultimate threat. A human being who doesn't need to improve. A soul who knows its own value without needing to prove it. So let us ask the final forbidden question. What if nothing is missing? Not in some sugary self-help way, but in the quiet, immovable truth that you were never broken, never lacking, never behind. From the moment you were born, you were complete, not finished, but complete in your unfinishedness. The tree does not judge its crooked branches. The ocean does not wish to be a mountain. The moon does not strive to shine more efficiently. They simply are. But we who've inherited the myth have forgotten how to be. We think our humanity is a problem to be solved, a mess to be organized, a program to be optimized. And so we become anxious machines, fragile and exhausted, running updates on a soul that never needed fixing. The truth? You are not software. You are not a brand. You are not a product of your own making. You are nature in motion, a storm with eyes, a question wrapped in flesh. You are not here to ascend. You are here to remember. And remembering hurts because it asks you to grieve the years spent running. It asks you to mourn the time wasted chasing a perfection that never existed. It asks you to stop feeding the illusion that you are only as valuable as what you produce. But in that grief is a strange kind of beauty. Because once you grieve the myth, you begin to see the miracle. There is no next level. There is only this moment. And this moment, this raw, unfiltered, unoptimized know-is where everything you've been chasing already lives. Not in the future, not in your resume, not in your accomplishments, but in your breath, in your stillness, in your ability to feel deeply what it means to be alive. This realization is not glamorous. It will not trend. It will not be turned into a 10-step plan, but it is sacred. It is the return to presence. It is the exhale after decades of inhaling pressure. It is the home you forgot you were already living in. So what now? Now you live differently. Not with fear, not with urgency, not with the frantic chase of the next upgrade, but with reverence. Reverence for the ordinary, for the unproductive hour, for the unrecorded joy, for the imperfect day that never becomes content, for the sunset you watch without needing to share it. This is the revolution, not a loud one, not a famous one, but a quiet, steady undoing of the lie, because the real opposite of progress is not failure, it is peace, not the peace of having it all figured out, but the peace of knowing you don't have to. So, as you reach the end of this script, don't look for a next step. Don't turn this into a project. Let it sit. Let it burn. Let it undo something inside you. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you feel that ache, the ache to do more, be more, prove more, you'll stop. You'll remember this truth. You are already the miracle you've been chasing. You are the sky, not the ladder. You are the presence, not the progress. And that's enough. That's always been enough.